cup says, eat cake for breakfast. But I'm trying not to do that. So. I'd like to thank Nancy Nelson for inviting me to this beautiful church, and Dan and everyone involved. In case you haven't noticed, Nancy's not only a talented writer, but a lovely friend with a real passion for this church. When Nancy approached me, it was, I think, because she read a poem of mine that said, I was baptized as a Unitarian, and she was all over that. So, and she's right, I was baptized in this church more than 50 years ago. So by way of introduction, I'm going to share that poem, but first I want to tell you about a few things that the poem reminds me of in the context of this talk, for which I've chosen the seventh principle: respect for interdependent web of all existence, of which we are all part of. I'm drawn to this principle of connection as it applies to attachment and also separation, another feature of connection. Without separation, there is no loss, and without loss, there's a diminishment of appreciation for life and for others. I have the word Saudade up on the slide, and I've chosen that word as a sort of anchor today. It's a Portuguese word that's almost undefinable in English. It refers to a deep emotional state of melancholic longing for a person or a thing that is absent, the love that remains after someone is gone. It can also apply to something that has not even happened, or something that does not and cannot exist. Manuel de Mello calls it a pleasure you suffer, an ailment you enjoy. For me, the word contains an emotional thread of connection, a universally shared feeling. Consider longing, for instance, as it applies to immigrants who became homesick upon seeing something that reminds them of their motherland, the place where they felt most at home, even as they're overjoyed to be part of this new free country. This word brought to mind an exhibit created by award-winning photographer Jim Loneson. I attended the exhibit called What We Carry at the Arab American Museum a few years ago after learning about it from one of its participants, my amazing friend, poet, writer, educator, and activist, Elise Alusi. It featured small objects refugees carried from their homeland on their journey to America. Now picture yourself in their situation and imagine, what would you carry? What is precious to you? Not to compare myself with the unimaginable journey of the refugees, but when I left home at 19 to get my first apartment, I took a tray with me that connected me to happy times with my family. My parents were divorced when I was quite young, and I was close to my father. He spoke 9 languages fluently, and he worked out of our home as a translator. He was there to greet me each day after school, and I remember fondly our trips to the Easter market in Detroit, and the subsequent flourish of preparing meals when we got home with my mother. One day, without notice, without my having a chance to even say goodbye, he was gone, and my life changed forever. I'm going to read a poem, and in it I mentioned the word Druze. It's the religion I was born into. It's described as an esoteric, ethno-religious group who self-identify as Unitarians. And I'll tell you a little more about that later. This poem is called As Pressing Is to Flowers. And this is the one that Nancy read, I think so. The only precious thing I own, this pressed flower tray from Lebanon, where trays like this are made by people with names like Kajeli, my Lebanese name, which I only recently discovered translates to partridge. So, I'm from the Partridge family. But my last name is Shipley after my grandfather's middle name. It's no wonder I'm a girl with no sense of direction, map challenged, who cherishes the inheritance of a tray from a father that wanted me to come to Lebanon to marry my intended, well, his intended, a good Druze man. Under my breath, I'd sing, a good Druze man is hard to find. After having grown up in Detroit and baptized Unitarian, we served meals on this tray, snacks and drinks. The Lebanese tray maker wasn't picturing when she pressed oval glass over a micro-meadow of dried beet stalks and wildflowers gathered from the Bekaa Valley. Flowers that inherited their yellows, pinks, and violets, and somehow remembered those genomes even as they faded. Sometimes we served Maxwell House, not rich Turkish coffee scented with cardamom, often with a cup reading at the end, a bonus like the prize in Cracker Jacks, back when they had the ornate bird whistles and the decoder rings, not the disappointing little paper things they have today. Usually we served Lipton, not milky, tea brewed with cinnamon sticks, ginger, anise, and orange rind studded with cloves. Its exotic bouquet wafting from the kitchen like a belly dancer's scarves. I say Maxwell House is to Turkish coffee as Twinkies are to baklava. Crisp Lebanese baklava made with chopped pistachios and drizzled with fragrant rose water. I won't deny that I love Twinkies, and I felt bad when the company went bankrupt. Twinkies are to America as stability is to Lebanon, though arguably, since Twinkies are preserved to last indefinitely. But this tray, the one thing I took when I left home, is my only palpable connection to my father, a man my New York mother married in Beirut, a good Druze man who should not have been intended for her. I say rubble is to buildings, as marriage is to parents, as flowers are to fading, as fading is to what remains. Millions of, that's the end of the poem, just to let you know. Millions of Iraqis have left their homes and relocated in hopes of creating a better future without war and uncertainty. This was written by Jim Lomason on his blog. Hundreds of thousands of refugees have immigrated to the United States, the majority with nothing more than the clothes on their back and a small memento to remind them of home. The objects and the stories behind them illustrate the common threads that bind all humanity, the shared love of family, friends, and the places and people we call home. I'm going to show you just a few examples of these mementos that they brought. Start with this one. And each person wrote a little paragraph about what the item meant to them. This person, named Susan Bowery, wrote, "We ate on this plate since childhood and every holiday until I left. This plate reminds me of my precious mother. When I felt danger threaten my life and the life of my family, I took some clothes and put them in bags, and then I went to the kitchen and took this plate that always reminds me of my mother when she used to cook biryani and serve it to us during the holidays in Iraq. Whenever I see it, I remember the holidays in our house and how beautiful they were, and how they carried the real meaning of holidays. I remember every Christmas when I see this plate, and I remember my sisters, brothers, and the beautiful, safe days we spent at our home in Iraq. I couldn't abandon this plate and leave. I wanted something that reminds me of my mother and my home." I bought this domino set with me from Baghdad because it reminds me of the great times I spent with my friends. I chose this from all the other stuff because I know those old times may not come back again. When I went to see my friends for the last time before leaving my country, they gave me this domino set to keep and to remind me of the great times we spent together. And finally, I am Mushtaba, 15 years old. I bought these shoes from Al-Ashab 5 years ago. I could not believe that I will travel to the USA one day and these shoes will accompany me and will take part in the exhibition around the United States. As if I knew that these shoes would be a visa to freedom. Your friend, Jacques Ashore, Detroit. I'm going to read another poem that's inspired by more current events. It's called Close. When NPR announced Mars will appear larger in the sky tonight, that its orbit will bring it closer to Earth, I thought of the times I've heard you can almost touch it. The misses and near misses, the lingering before yes or no, marriages, children, flights that could have gone either way. I thought of the trajectory of roots, old trees, patches of land inhabited by families over centuries, the silent march of footprints, and the word belonging, how the towering pines in our yard belong to us, used to belong to someone else, and will belong to others who will claim them as their own. I thought of the words, when we are gone, how we travel among our own swath of humanity, share the same mood, see the old statues fall, new leaders rise. Years ago, my husband showed me Mars with his telescope, stars and planets I'd never seen simply because I never looked. An unfathomable wilderness that made me feel safer just knowing there was more. The news that followed Mars was the demise of a small boat crammed with 500 human beings. Their weight, the weight of their longing, too heavy for the saran of salt water, stretched to hold the words, sister, mother, father, brother, baby, daughter, son. How with no space between them, they became one word, refugees, unable to realize the dream they could almost touch. Now I'm thinking about the difference between night and day, how day is being and night is searching, and the sky with all that room. Back when I attended this church, I was suffering from homesickness, not for my home, but for the feeling of home that I had before the loss of my father. One way I stay connected to him is through fond memories of going to the market. I still love to get up on Saturday morning and visit ethnic markets, the Polish market, the Korean market, the Arabic market, to relive that joy before our separation. Even the word separation is a trigger that creates Saudade for me. It seems highlighted when I see or hear it. So naturally, I was drawn to a painting by Norwegian painter Edvard Munch, entitled Separation. I wrote a poem entitled Saudade, based on this painting. And I'm going to just mention that this poem is a sestina. And I usually don't read sestinas, but it's good for this, so I'm going to tell you a little about it. When you write a sestina, you pick 6 words, choose 6 words, and there are 6 stanzas. And on each stanza, one of those 6 words appears at the end in a different order for each stanza. And because that's complicated, I decided to put it up here so you could see a little bit of it while I'm reading. I don't know how clear that is, but there. Saudade. Having glimpsed the one he loves, a man holds his hand over his heart to guard it, and more to keep it from falling from his chest. It has seared, burned through his suit. The trees, the water, the clouds, everything has stopped but his longing, which feeds the earth at his feet. Rising from the soil, a large crimson flower shaped as, is it a couple embracing? He turns away, is in no shape to address the blithe woman behind him. Her hand outstretched, she glides toward the sea, yellow hair rising, floating. Even gravity can't hold her down. Crestfallen, his mouth forms an empty O. He knows he must stop, that it is futile to ask her to stay. Haven't we all felt unsuited for the risk of attachment? Our closets filled with suits of mourning, the loss of father, lovers, friends, shaping, coloring us dark as the flower's inky stamen, our unstoppable grief. Lost in reverie, the man indulges on one hand the ache, but also the lingering happiness of having fallen in love, its taunting afterglow. Dear monk, you who reprise the essence of Saudade, the beautiful sadness rising, bittersweet perfume of a dying rose, brush always in pursuit of mood, the steely blue of an indifferent sky, nightfall's lonely hour, this black shore with dark orbs shaped into islands of isolation. And the way the man's hand is outlined with the red of his leaking heart. She stops as if to offer a final glance. Or maybe she has stopped because she's no longer real. An ethereal spirit rising, haunting reminder of loss for one unable to handle yet another. He feels her breeze by brushing his suit, feels the weight of the black foliage, black clouds shaped like footprints leaving, the homesick scent of early fall. But what if I've gotten this wrong? What if he's fallen in love with sadness itself, the habit of melancholy he can't stop revisiting? Her dress meets the road to form a loose-shaped heart, one unable to stand on its own. No surprise, it lies on its side, plays dead. Paralyzed, his pursuit of her withers into a fate that slips out of his hands. Sorrow has reshaped the hours, the seasons. He rises to eternal fall, yet still that tug of spring. And so it suits him, this familiar dystopia, this love he can't unhand. Blanche Dubois in Tennessee Williams streetcar named Desire said, I have always depended on the kindness of strangers. I love that line because we, all of us, depend on the kindness of strangers. We saw this in the many unfortunate recent events from Las Vegas to Puerto Rico. People risking their lives to save others. Sometimes we forget that we're all connected by our shared humanity because there are so many ways to be divided. We tend to define and isolate ourselves by religious beliefs, gender, economic status, even the way we dress. But there are events in our recent history, and even now, where those superficial markers have been meaningless. When the towers fell, I don't know if you can all remember where you were or how you felt, but we all felt like one country, one America. After the divorce, my mother worked 2 jobs, and my grandmother, excuse me, sorry. My mom worked 2 jobs, and my grandmother arrived from Lebanon to care for me and my brother. She did not speak English and never learned to read or write because it was forbidden. At the age of 12, she was forced to marry a much older man she did not love. I'd like to share a poem I wrote entitled Arranged Marriage. Imagine climbing an almond tree, groping your way among its pink blossoms. You straddle limbs thin as your delicate arms, your legs wobbly as newborn lambs. You are 12, reaching for the ear of the sky from the top of this tree, hoping to be heard by any god on this your wedding day. A young Eve taking refuge, dreading the much older Adam who celebrates beneath you. One oblivious to the hard bark that scrapes your soft flesh, flesh whiter than a woman's, white as the new bed linens that mouth your name below. Grandma divorced this man, which was unheard of in Lebanon, and later, after much persuasion, she remarried, this time to a man she loved deeply. They moved to upstate New York, a town called Malone, and they owned the town grocery store. It was up on a little hill in the center of town. They sold oysters and all kinds of things. And they were very attached to the community. My grandmother worked day and night, sometimes until 2 a.m., and she memorized all the prices and all the products, all for a dream of moving back to Lebanon and buying a building in Beirut. My grandfather left ahead of her to get affairs in order, but once he arrived to Lebanon, his brother talked him into buying a farm instead of the building they had planned on. This farm was a place that elicited awful memories for her, and a place she vowed never to return to. So when she arrived, she felt deeply betrayed and could no longer trust him, and then she left. It's like spending years writing a great novel and suddenly have it just blow away in a gust of wind. She arrived before my father left and witnessed the closeness between us, and I instantly became an outsider. She'd tell me I was more of his family than her family. The only place we crossed borders was in her kitchen, where she was most comfortable and where I was an eager pupil. Here's a poem I wrote about my attempt to win her over. In it, I mentioned the word kish, and kish is a cracked wheat with dried yogurt that's used in Arabic cooking. This is called grape leaves. My grandmother Situ took me for walks down the alley behind our home in Detroit. There, flanking the gravel paths, were rusted fences that became trellises to grapevines. She taught me to look for young, tender leaves and pick them with a delicate touch. Here, we forget the clash of our cultures, trying to define what it means to be a woman. Her girlhood plucked early, marriage arranged. Femininity was a hard green grape, still tart from being harvested too soon. I pinched the leaves using the tips of my fingernails, careful not to yank or tear, as we stacked them mid-rib to mid-rib. For her, so much depended on the meal, the carnal affection of the dinner table, intimacy without shame. Translated from Lebanese, warak arish means paper of the vines. Uneducated, this was a paper she could read. The way she read the dandelions she picked for a salad mixed with kish, or tall grasses she'd dye with red onion peel to weave into baskets. I helped her blanch the grape leaves, make them pliable, smoothing the shiny side down, spooning ground lamb, rice, and spices into the center. She taught me to fold the sides over, tucking them in as she rolled them into wine cork shapes. Watched me do the same. We nestled them in the pot on a rack of lamb riblets. Let everything simmer together. The warmth of those moments. Food, our common language, as we reached across barriers and fences, where the most tender leaves seemed to say, pick me, pick me. Incidentally, though we clashed when I was younger, we grew very close later in life. And she was a great cook, and I wrote a cookbook for her. I'm just showing you the cover of the cookbook, and that's my grandmother. And it's called Tafadalu, and that means sit down, relax, enjoy some food. So it was all her recipes in that book. So she wrote a book. She dictated it. I want to say one more thing about the kindness of strangers. I had an art gallery for over 33 years. Looking back, I'm still surprised at the unwavering confidence I had opening my gallery, despite a chorus of people who suggested I would fail miserably. When I was referred to a longtime gallery owner for a consultation, he treated me like an idiot. He said, "You'll never make it," and I wept with disappointment on the way home. Soon after, I attended a seminar at Detroit Country Day School. They were featuring successful business owners. And I sat in on Florentine Van Tine's session, a woman who had become a millionaire by the age of 27, which was my age then. She came up with the Fly Drive campaign for Hertz Rent-A-Car, and then she started the Hollywood Bread Company. Her speech was sincere, part business, part personal. Her husband and son had been killed in a car crash, and she was acutely aware of the limitations of money when it comes to having a meaningful life. One thing I took with me was her assertion that people want to help you. All you need to do is ask, she said. But asking was not something I was comfortable with. A short time later, when my so-called friends treated me like steerage on the Titanic, I decided I would need a raft. So I took a deep breath and I dialed up Miss Van Tine. To my great surprise, her secretary put me right through. She didn't even ask me what I was calling about. I repeated the assertion that people want to help you. All you have to do is ask. And she asked me where I lived, and I said Southfield, and she was all the way in Metamora. She said, I'll come to Southfield on Friday. Do you know where the Pancake House is, the original Pancake House? And that's where we met. At the table, she sat down, and she ordered a German pancake for both of us. I'd never had a German pancake. And she took out her checkbook and said, how much money do you need? I said, oh, no, I would never. That isn't why I wanted to see you. I explained my idea for the gallery and how everyone was trying to talk me out of it. All I hear is no. She listened intently and responded with, if you showed a diagram of the first wheelbarrow to people, 9 out of 10 of them will tell you why the wheelbarrow would never work. Promise you'll do me a favor. When you hear the word no, I want you to picture me saying yes. It was powerful and exactly what I needed from this complete stranger. Looking back, the fact that the landlord in the then upscale Franklin Plaza leased me the space was itself incredible. Forget that I was undercapitalized, I looked like a skinny kid, and when I knocked on his trailer door at the construction site, I was wearing a white t-shirt and jeans. He opened the door and I said, I'd like to rent one of your stores for a gallery. I was shaking inside. He looks at me and he says, what's a little girl like you want to open a business for? He was a bald Russian man with an accent. He seemed very gruff at first. I ignored that and I explained to him what I wanted to do. He says, look, I don't know what you're talking about, but come on in, sit. I'm going to call someone. If he likes your idea, you have the space. He called the owner of another shop in the mall, a man who appeared to be in his late 30s. I explained my idea right down to the interior that I imagined. He looked at the landlord and said, I like it. The landlord looks at me and says, it's yours. Later, I was to discover he had a list of many established retailers that wanted that space. The gallery grew over the years, expanding from 950 square feet to 5,000 square feet, and I provided work for 13 employees. It was honored as one of the top 100 galleries in the country by Decor magazine. I asked Terry later, why on earth did you rent that store to me? And he said, I had a good feeling about you. My point is that no matter how much you feel you are an outsider, how many no's come at you, there are always those who will let you in, and you must seek them out. At a time when interconnectedness is being maligned in favor of nationalism, we need the courage to attach ourselves to others and also to be the strangers who provide the kindness that others will remember when faced with some of the harder challenges. I've discovered that Saudade can apply to many things. When I drive down Northwestern and pass my old gallery, I usually kind of don't look at it. But every now and then I look in that window and I see the store and all the people who helped me. And I'm struck with that. I'm going to close with one last poem, a short poem. And it's called The Meaning of Life. In the Clorox commercial, there's a stream of washing machines, one after another, morphing from vintage white to modern candy apple red. Folks doing laundry in a continuum from 1913, back before I was here, back when Clorox came in amber bottles, before the white plastic of now, before biodegradable was another way to say green. Housewives of the 50s and 60s in aprons transformed into men and women today, all part of this strange continuity. And the washing machines, from ringers to dials to touchpads, but all with the same purpose, to get the dirt out. It makes me feel a part of the great pajama drawstring, a long thread I've held on to, and after I'm gone, will still have been a part of. It comforts me to know that Clorox bleaches out stains, even the ones left behind. Thank you.